Lots of exciting action from week number 12. We got your winners and losers here on CBS Sports HQ. Josh Allen finally looking like the guy that we were expecting for the last couple of weeks. Had a big game despite the loss against the Eagles. Welcome back, Kyren Williams, looking like the star that he was before he had the ankle injury. Mike Evans continues to make us all look foolish for not ranking him high enough in the preseason. And then the change in coordinator for Pittsburgh allowed Pat Freiermuth to step up and have a huge game as the Steelers beat the Bengals. Here are the four big producers at their respective positions from week number 12. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings, giving you more winners and losers from this week. And Heath, I just, stole Pat Freiermuth as one of my winners because it was just awesome to see. Finally, Matt Canada gone and Kenny Pickett throwing down the field, throwing down the middle of the field, and Pat Freiermuth looking like the guy that we thought at the beginning of the season when we both said he could be a breakout candidate this year. And hopefully it's a sign of things to come. Now, look, the Bengals matchup has been absolutely fantastic for opposing tight ends, so it could be good for Evan Ingram going this week. But he's one of my biggest winners, along with Trevor Lawrence, back-to-back games with over 23 fantasy points. Can he do it for a third time? He gets to face the Bengals in Week 13 on Monday night. I think Trevor Lawrence, based on all the teams on a bye, can be a starting fantasy quarterback once again. Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice, two Chiefs that I think worth mentioning. Isaiah Pacheco was our start of the week, came through as a top 5 fantasy running back, barring what happens Monday night, but good to see him find the end zone twice after not getting into the end zone on the ground for 5 games in a row. Took advantage of that Raiders defense. And Rashee Rice, we finally got a receiver for Kansas City to step up and have a big game. Hopefully that's a sign of things to come as well. As you see here, the catches, great. The targets, amazing. The yards, the touchdown, all things that Rashee Rice is capable of doing on a consistent basis. Now, maybe it had to do with no Mecole Hardman, no Kadarius Toney. I don't care who's back for the Chiefs moving forward. I think this is a guy that we're going to see Patrick Mahomes continue to lean on, and it was fun to watch. So make sure he's not available on your waiver wire. Make sure he's rostered in all your leagues because you could be starting him from this point forward after what we saw from Rice in Week 12.
Speaking of Patrick Mahomes, I think he was a winner, not just because he finally got to that 24 fantasy point mark, and honestly, he could have got to 30 fantasy points if they'd given him the Isaiah Pacheco touchdown that he should have gotten, but because Rashee Rice has emerged as the #1 wide receiver. He's the most talented wide receiver on this team, and we've just kind of been waiting for this, so a huge win for him that Rice was able to fill that role. Also a big win for Nico Collins. People had really moved towards Tank Dell as the clear #1. I think it's a 1A, 1B situation. Both these guys rank as top 15 wide receivers per game in fantasy this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if both these guys, Collins and Dell, rank as top 15 guys rest of season. Not a huge game from Isaiah likely, but when you put it in the context of the fact that he had 3 targets in the 2 games that Mark Andrews had either missed or left early, the 6 looks pretty good. I am actually trying to hold him through his bye. I think he might be a starter in the fantasy playoffs, but the big winner for me was Josh Jacobs. We had seen his role in the passing game completely disappear with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback, and since the coaching change had happened, yes, they were still giving him 20 rushes a game, but this is a bad team that's really struggled with rushing efficiency. So the fact that he saw 6 targets in this game makes me feel a lot better about Josh Jacobs as a top 12 running back in the fantasy playoffs.
Good to see Jacobs bounce back, and we'll see hopefully if he comes off of his bye playing like the guy that we saw prior to the last couple of weeks, or before at least the Chiefs game, when he was struggling a little bit with the catches. That's a great call from you, Heath. Let's look at the losers that we're talking about from week number 12. And for me, Justin Herbert, I don't know what Brandon Staley's talking about, must-win game. The Chargers look like they're falling and falling fast out of playoff contention, and probably Brandon Staley on the way out the door as the next head coach that could be fired. Joe Mixon coming off a disappointing performance, first game without Joe Burrow, and he did not look good running against Steelers. Granted, it is Pittsburgh's run defense, but still, you want to see more from Mixon, and certainly this is a big alarm going up that you can't trust him in the fantasy playoffs. You saw a bad game for Puka Nacua. You saw a bad game for Cooper Kupp. But Kupp was limping around, not necessarily thrilled about him. We'll talk about him more in a second. And then Dalton Schultz, we've been kind of getting by with touchdowns over the last couple weeks from him. He did not score. And as Heath alluded to, you got Nico Collins with a big game. Tank Dell had a big game. Noah Brown's return might be looming, and it could be time to say Dalton Schultz is not a must-start fantasy tight end moving forward. But in terms of Cooper Kupp, it's now been a tough struggle to see both Rams wide receivers of Nacua and Kupp step up and play well at the same time. And what really was scary was watching Kupp limp through that game against the Cardinals. Now, we know they did a great job running the ball. The tight ends were involved in terms of Tyler Higbee finding the end zone, and I thought Stafford actually played well. But to see him do this without Kupp, without Nacua stepping up, shows you that it doesn't necessarily mean that Stafford's going to have to rely on his top 2 receivers, and Kupp no longer is guaranteed to be the top receiver for the Rams moving forward. So you're still probably starting him going into Week 13, but no longer a top 10 wide receiver, and probably questionable top 20 guy as well. So even though 6 teams on a bye, tough to trust Cooper Kupp right now.
I take no joy in saying this, but I've got Gardner Minshew as a loser. A fantastic matchup against Tampa Bay. He did absolutely nothing with it. Listen, Minshew's been good, great even for Michael Pittman. He's been good for most of the year when Josh Downs has been healthy. He's been good for Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss before that. But for himself, for fantasy managers who have tried to use him, he hasn't been very good at all. And I'm going to struggle to even use him in another great matchup this week as a streaming option. James Conner, I had high hopes for him coming back off the IR. It was nice to see the 4 receptions. But the work in the rushing game and the fact that Michael Carter was seeing touches in this game early, Amari DeMarcado was seeing touches in this game early, not just when it was a blowout. I don't know that Connor's going to be that workhorse back that we were hoping he was going to be. Kyle Pitts coming off the bye. Maybe we were foolish to even have any hopes for him. You can kick him to the waiver wire curb. And then Jamar Chase, I think you might look at his first game with the backup quarterback and think, 12 PPR fantasy points, 81 yards. It wasn't that bad. He caught 4 passes. Only 2 of those passes came directly from his quarterback. The other 2 were deflected into his hands. They can't throw anything downfield. Jake Browning does not process the pass rush well. I am not certain that Jamar Chase is going to be even a top 15 or 20 wide receiver rest of season.
It's very frustrating to hear because we know what he can be when he's healthy. And again, as he said earlier this season, he's always bleeping open. Well, get open for Jake Browning and stop relying on those deflected passes to get your production. All right, let's help some fantasy managers. Heath, again, 6 teams on a bye in week 13. So a lot of replacement options that could be needed, and we'll show you the waiver wire options for now. We're going to get into a lot more on Tuesday. Certainly check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast and, of course, our story on CBSSports.com. But as we've said, Pat Freiermuth coming off a huge game in the first game without Matt Canada calling plays. Mike Sullivan, the play caller, quarterbacks coach there, dialing up some plays and a lot of targets for Freiermuth, so going to be a must-add player at a thin position. Then you also look at a couple running backs on this list. Jeff Wilson, Royce Freeman, we know they're backup options. Same thing with Samaje Perine. But you could be needing these guys as potential flex options, and we don't know when Devon Achan's coming back for the Dolphins, so Wilson could be in a great spot against the Commanders. Samaje Perine's been the pass catcher for the Broncos, but also, as we saw, when Javonte Williams got a little bit banged up, found the end zone, so it could be a flex option moving forward there. And then with the way that Kyren Williams and Royce Freeman ran the ball, granted, they're not going to do that in week 13 against the Browns, but they did take advantage of that Cardinals defense, and Freeman could be that second option for the Rams now that Darrell Henderson is out of the way. But obviously, Kyren Williams in a good spot. I'm going to disagree with Heath a little bit. I'm going to go back to Gardner Minshew this week because of the matchup against the Titans. It's been very good for opposing quarterbacks, and again, we're down a lot of big-time quarterbacks, so you might be starting Gardner Minshew in week 13.
The wide receivers will have a lot to do with health this week. Demario Douglas going to be in the concussion protocol. We'll see if he can get healthy. If he is, he would be my top option, really becoming the clear number 1 wide receiver for the Patriots over the last month of the season. Odell Beckham has been really good on a per route basis, especially without Mark Andrews on the field, but only ran about a third to half of the Ravens' routes. So I don't think his shoulder's totally healthy, but Douglas and Beckham could both be starts this week if they're healthy. Dortch, it's the other way around. It's whether or not Michael Wilson is going to be healthy, because we have seen he plays that slot role when Michael Wilson's out. Rondale Moore gets kicked outside. It's not good for Dortch or Rondale Moore to play outside. Dortch is going to see 6 to 8 targets if he's playing in the slot. That might make him useful. The guy at the bottom of the list, though, in deeper leagues, and he's on a bye this week, so it's not quite as exciting, but Jalin Hyatt, I really liked what I saw from him. We saw a connection with Tommy DeVito earlier in the season with Darius Slayton, and I wonder if Hyatt kind of takes over that role when they come out of the bye. He could be a boom-bust number 3 or flex wide receiver, especially in deeper leagues.
Yeah, fun to sort of roster these players moving forward, but they could be difference makers down the stretch. All right, Heath, we've got a game tonight between 2 NFC North teams, and I think as we'll show you with our lineups on FanDuel, we like the quarterbacks in tonight's game. So for me on FanDuel, the MVP is going to be Joshua Dobbs. I think he bounces back from his down game, I'm saying that in air quotes, after just 18 fantasy points last week. He's been consistently above 27 fantasy points for the most part since joining the Vikings. So while the Bears defense has improved, I think Dobbs will still make plays with his legs. He scored a rushing touchdown in 5 straight games, and I think he'll go head-to-head with Justin Fields. Love the setup there for both of those guys. I'm going to play a mini stack here within the game of Justin Fields and DJ Moore, and then my second tier options will be Ty Chandler and Johnny Munt. I don't love the opportunity for Munt as the third tight end, but we know Dobbs loves leaning on his tight ends no matter who, wink, wink, might be playing a wide receiver tonight for the Vikings. But I think we saw Ty Chandler 4 catches last week. That's something I think will be a sort of a staple that he takes over the passing downs role in that backfield ahead of Alexander Madison.
I've got Fields in the MVP instead of Dobbs, but I think the three must plays on this slate are Fields, Dobbs, and Ty Chandler because he's way too cheap at 8,500. It's hard to run on this Bears team, and Ty Chandler is the pass catching back, so I do think that he'll have a better day than Alexander Mattison, and he's a lot cheaper. TJ Hawkinson at 13,000. I'll pair him up with Dobbs because of that tight end connection you mentioned. And then Equanimeous St. Brown had 2 targets in the Bears last game. Let's hope one of them goes into the end zone.
Hey, it could always happen. But again, as you see here, we like the quarterbacks here. Fields, Dobbs, Field, whatever order, they should be in your MVP spot. And hopefully they will deliver in this matchup tonight in the AFC North Showdown between the Vikings and the Bears. Great job, Heath. You want to hear more of us? You can check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast, wherever podcasts are available. We're helping you get ready for the fantasy playoffs. They are coming quickly. So make sure those lineups are right. The ad drops are ready to go. And you have everything you need. The Fantasy Football Today podcast